Hi, this is Stephen from Owner Disown. Now, Gigabyte sent me the 17-inch X7 V8 to review. Now, if you're after a more portable GTX 1080 laptop with an overclockable CPU, this may be what you are looking for. Compared to the usual desktop replacement laptops like my Sage NP9877, it is positively skinny. To further decrease its weight, its power brick is only 250 watts versus the usual 330 watts, and it's considerably smaller and also has a USB port to charge devices such as your phone. This means that you can save over £5 in your backpack, and if you travel quite a bit, the X7 V8 is a good option for you. I was worried that the 250 watt power brick would be too low, especially when the power pull peaked at 280 watts. I didn't notice any battery discharging, but in general the GPU pulls less watts than competing GTX 1080 models, so it might be okay. For $3,000 you get two 8GB sticks of DDR4 2666 MHz RAM, which is expandable to 64 gigs. You get a 512GB NVMe SSD with one open M.2 slot and a 1TB hard drive. Powering it is a large 94 watt-hour battery that is good for 3.5 hours of runtime. Wi-Fi is courtesy of the Killer 1535 card, and I did not see any issues with it. The CMOS battery is also accessible should you need to reset the BIOS. The sound is also pretty good. Bass is produced by two 2-watt subwoofers, and it also has two 2-watt speakers firing down from the front. At 78 decibels, they are not the loudest, but they are definitely better than average. The trend these days is for fast 1080p displays, and this A0 panel is no exception. It has G-Sync and a fast refresh rate of 144 Hz, and I'm not sure what the response time is, but it held up very well in my ghosting test, perhaps slightly behind the 120 Hz TN panel on my Sage NP9877. It's Pantone certified, and indeed colours are nice and clear, although they are not as accurate as the MSI GT63 Titan. The anti-glare coating on the IPS display does a decent amount of job of negating those reflections, and backlight bleed is also minimal. Build quality is superb. The lid and chassis are made out of black anodized aluminium with the Aorus symbol lighting up nicely in the dark. The panel is thin, but it has a little bit of flex, but nothing to be over worried about. Up top we have a 720p webcam. I'm disappointed that at $3,000 you don't get a 1080p one, but it is serviceable. Attention to detail also extends to underneath, with the design of the air vents and large feet. On the left hand side you have the Ethernet port, 3 USB 3 ports and separate headphone and mic jacks, making use of the 24-bit 192 kHz ESS Sabre Hi-Fi DAC. Notice a large CPU exhaust vent to the left and the speaker grill to the right, as well as a nice air gap at the back to help with airflow. On the right hand side we have a mini DisplayPort 1.4, which is good for an 8K display, HDMI 2.0 to give true 4K 60Hz, a Thunderbolt 3 port, a USB-C port and a UHS 2 SD card reader. And the SD card sticks most of the way in. Now Gigabyte is one of the only ones I have seen that use a UHS 2 card reader, which is great for managing large files. Writing a 4GB video file to it, I saw 209 megabytes per second. But look how fast copying the same file is, from the SD card back to the SSD. Fantastic. Around back you have the excellently placed power port and a fourth USB 3 port. Aorus uses an island style RGB keyboard with per key backlight control and 80 key N key rollover. Typing on the keys is quite good, with a decent amount of travel, and thankfully the Elan trackpad is quite responsive and is better than the Aero 15 for some reason. The Aorus logo on the trackpad can actually also be configured in various different colours. And above the keyboard you see some nice air intakes. You know what, I wish more manufacturers did this. Key lighting is controlled using their Fusion software. You can choose one of several set presets or create your own, and you can easily create shortcuts to commonly used functions or create your own macro using one of the 5 macro keys on the left of the keyboard. The command and control center software also lets you overclock the CPU up to 4.3 GHz and the GPU by up to 4 levels. But to be honest, you will, as you'll see shortly, this has very little effect, and you are better off using throttle stop and MSI Afterburner. One useful bit of software is the ability to alter how the battery charges. Whether you want it balanced, whether you want to charge quickly or to a certain percentage, perhaps even to safeguard that battery life. Both the 6-core i7-8850H CPU and GTX 1080 graphics card are cooled with 3 heat pipes and 2 heatsinks. The fans can be controlled via software, and by default it is set to the gaming fan profile, but you can set it to quiet, where the fans don't spin up until a certain temperature is reached. It's usually around 60 degrees. You can have it set to normal fan, or customize it where you can set the fan speed to a set certain percentage, or set it to deep where you can adjust the fan curve yourself. Now, you know what? You have to give credit to Gigabyte for allowing such great control options. With such a thin chassis, how loud do these fans get? Well, with a gaming fan at load, it spins at 4,286 RPM and produces quite a loud 44 decibels. And at 100%, the fans spin at 5,208 RPM and a loud 50 decibels. Under load, the top of the keyboard, to its center is about 38 to 41 degrees. It does feel quite warm near the hinge. But the AWSD keys, trackpad and palm rests are much cooler and comfortable to use. You can see warm air being pushed from the GPU at the side. Underneath it is much warmer at about 50 degrees, so if it is under load, I recommend you use it on a table or a laptop tray. But the cooling system is definitely doing its job, with warm air being pushed out of the back and the sides. I tested each game using the gaming fan and max fan profiles. I also ran each game at stock CPU and GPU speeds, as well as them overclocked using the included software, and also using throttle stop and MSI Afterburner. And here are my settings. I recorded the max GPU temperature in yellow, the average GPU temperature in green, and the same for the CPU, average in blue and the max temperature in orange. You can see that there is not a lot of difference between using the gaming fan or the max fan. We only see a 4-point difference in the max GPU temperature, so you might as well stick with the quieter gaming fan, to be honest. Also, overclocking the CPU to 4.3 GHz using their software had no effect in gaming performance at all. And even overclocking the GPU to the max level of 4 only gave an average of an extra 1 FPS. So if you are not into overclocking or undervolting, I'd stick with the base clocks and using the gaming fan. You will see the CPU spike up to about 92 degrees, but at least the average of 78 degrees is good. If you do undervolt by 150 millivolts, then you will see an average reduction of 16 degrees on the CPU average temperature and 9 degrees off of the max CPU temperature. Undervolting also increases CPU performance, as you will see shortly. Overclocking the GPU using Afterburner results in an average increase of 7 FPS over the already decent 123 FPS game average. The lowest frame rate that I got in my game testing was about 44, which is not enough to cause any stutter, and gaming I found was buttery smooth. You can also enable G-Sync, but I find that with such fast refresh monitors at such high frame rates, it is hard to see any tearing. Here I play Overwatch with epic settings, using no undervolt, and the GPU and CPU overclocked using the inbuilt software. In this game, the CPU held its clock speed pretty well. Having the CPU top out at 4.1 GHz and an undervolt sees a nice reduction in temperature and perhaps even a slightly better frame rate. Maxing everything and undervolting sees even better frame rates, approaching about 130 FPS, with CPU temperatures in the low 80s. In Firestrike, overclocked to the max using their software, we get 17,128 points. But notice the CPU frequency in purple, it does dip near the end. Doing the same test but overclocking using throttle stop and Afterburner, we get a 9% improvement at 18,677 points, and also the CPU frequency in purple stays steady at 4.3 GHz. Unfortunately, this doesn't hold true in all games. Here's some footage, and you will often see the CPU downclock. I found capping it at the Core 1 at 4.2 and the Core 6 at 4.1 GHz usually solve this. So stock settings are in blue and overclocked in orange. I compare it against the 15-inch MSI GT63 and the Sage NP9877. The MSI has a 6-core 8750H CPU and the Sage a desktop 8700K CPU. At stock settings, the MSI does better and its GPU pulls more watts than that of the Aorus. Overclocking closed the gap somewhat, and interestingly the 8750H averages only 100 MHz less than the 8850H. So Doom Ultra settings, we get huge frame rates, no doubt as a result of that fast clocked CPU. We do see occasional drops below the 4 GHz mark. And look at this, at stock clocks we get 154 FPS, much faster than the MSI, and since GPU clocks are the same, it must be that faster CPU. Again, the Aorus GTX 1080 pulls less watts. Far Cry 5 Ultra settings, the CPU downclocks slightly, but the GPU holds at a steady 1987 MHz boost clock. GPU utilization is anywhere from 67 to 95%. Compared to the 15-inch MSI, it performs slightly better. Not much in it really, but we do see a constant theme. The 8850H consuming about 15 watts more than the 8750H, and its GTX 1080 consuming about 20 watts less. Rise of the Tomb Raider, we definitely see more CPU throttling, but performance remains high, and we see a good GPU utilization of about 97%. Compared to the GT63 Titan, performance is very similar, and calls into question, do we really need the 8850H, for gaming anyhow? In PUBG Ultra settings, we see high GPU utilization, but again, the CPU can downclock below the 4 GHz mark. Look at the low CPU usage. That is one of the key benefits of having these 6-core CPUs. Here we see the Aorus drop quite far behind the rest. The main culprit is a lower GPU boost clock at its stock settings. The first of my non-gaming tests is Cinebench R15. At stock clocks, there is not much separating the 8750H and the more expensive 8850H. But the advantage of the latter is that it can be overclocked using the unlocked multipliers. It can go all the way up to 4.7 GHz. And when overclocked, the best score I got was 1316 points, which is not too off the stock clocked 8700K. But this is a short test, and it doesn't really give a chance for it to throttle. So let's see what a video render using my Adobe Premiere Pro does. At stock clocks, the 8850H throttles from its max 4.3 GHz down to 3145 MHz and matches the 8750H. Overclocking it shaves off just over 2 minutes and is 90 seconds faster than the MSI GT63. But look, just undervolting the CPU matches the overclock time, so that is a must. Finally, encoding a 4GB video file using Handbrake, again the stock clocked 8850H matches the 8750H, but overclocking it shaves off a nice 3.5 minutes. Still, it is nowhere near the stock clocked 8700K that turbos up to 4.7 GHz, showing that we are definitely power limited. So if you're going to do any serious CPU crunching, perhaps the i9 powered X9 is the way to go. Either way, what you get with the X7 DT-V8 is a very portable 17-inch laptop with good gaming panel, a good gaming performance, and decent thermals when it's undervolted. Now, with that undervolt, you'll also be able to dial in that fan noise, to something that's going to suit you, something nice and quiet. Now, build quality is great, and for us content creators, I really do like having that UHS to SD card reader. And also, this Elan trackpad is much better than in previous computers I've had, like the Aero 15. It's definitely better. Now, I'd like to thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.